your app for the conference. There's a couple questions that you can answer for us as we go through the summit that'll help kind of ground you, or go through this breakout that'll help kind of ground you in the conversation that we're going to have. So I'm really glad to be here with you this afternoon. And I appreciate the great introduction. And it's always awkward to be introduced. So much appreciated. So leading from the inside out, using people first. So I'd like to start us with a quote that some of you may have heard and you, or some of you may not have. It's all know that the drop merges into the ocean, but few know that the ocean merges into the drop. And that's by Kabir, who lived in the 1500s, and he was a poet, philosopher. But this idea, even if you realize it as you think about it, a lot of times we go through the days and the weeks and the months, and we don't necessarily realize how much we're impacted by what's going on around us. And we also don't always realize how much we are impacting what is going on around us. But those of you here that are attending the Purpose Summit clearly understand that we're here, we have purpose. You're here, you're seeking to learn how to impact the world. And so you're seeking to learn how to be, frankly, a really, really powerful drop. But when you think about yourself like that, you think, whoa, wait a minute. Like, if I'm merging into the ocean, what does that mean? How do I maintain my purpose? How do I make an impact? The ocean is so big. Well, it is. And that's why purpose is so important. And when we think about the ocean, what are we thinking about? We're thinking about the cultures that we all navigate every day. And I said that in plural for a reason, because we do navigate different cultures every day. We navigate the culture in our home. We navigate the culture at work, or maybe in the business that we run, at school, on the highway, driving back and forth, for those of us that are still commuting. And so we navigate several cultures every day. And so, I like to think of myself as merging in and out of different cultures. And while I also realize that those cultures merge with each other, what happens in my home only happens because of what is happening with my family members when they're outside of my home, right? So what they're doing when they're not there impacts what they're doing when they are there. And so we have to understand that all of these cultures mosh together and they create this big ocean that we're living within. And so when you think about this quote from Kabir, you might think, so what do I do with that? What do I do with that idea? And so all of us, every one of us, regardless of our age, our background, our preferences, our gender, our capabilities, possibly our disabilities, every single one of us brings something to this ocean that we're navigating every day. And as I mentioned earlier, we understand that because we're here focused on purpose. We're here focused on purpose. And so we all know that all of us together mean something, and all of us individually mean something. But do we think about how the external world is really impacting how we behave, what we do, our purpose, and how we live out our purpose every day? And if we don't, I'm going to challenge us to think about that a little bit today. You see, because we're all going through, moving around the world, some of us moving really fast, some of us moving a little bit more slowly. And there are all kinds of things that are kind of in the way, right? So the first one, top center, we've got time. And a lot of us are obsessed, let's say, with time and how it runs our lives and making sure we have alarms set for everything. And if we're not doing that, we at least at a minimum understand that time is important. We understand that we don't always have as much as we'd like. We understand that we get to choose how we use our time. And what happens to some people is time becomes an enemy. It becomes a source of stress. It becomes a thing that we feel like we can't control. we feel like we can't control, and in some cases it might consume us. In some cases we're not using our time as effectively as we can, and it does consume us. We're also cognizant of the fact that we have duties, we have responsibilities, we have work, we live to work. No, we work to live. But that becomes a responsibility. And sometimes that thing called work can consume us. It can become the ocean that consumes us. And maybe it's controlling our time. We recognize that we have goals that we want to meet. And sometimes those goals are on track, and sometimes those goals aren't on track. And so as you look at this slide, you think about your home responsibilities, your work responsibilities, maybe your school responsibilities. You think about your responsibility to the communities in which you live and work. And you think about the things you like to do. You think about sports that you may like to play, right? Maybe you're a footballer. And then you think about the people in your life that matters. And as you start to think about all of those things and all of those different cultures colliding, sometimes what happens is we feel like we're disappearing. We feel like we can't be ourselves. And some people often will not, when you ask them, what are you passionate about? What do you care about? What makes you happy? Many adults can't answer that question. Often children can answer that question much easier than adults can. So you'll hear in leadership speeches and in conversations, books about leadership, leadership books will say, well, find out what people are passionate about. And oftentimes, because of all of this that's going on in our lives, we're not sure, right? We're just not sure. And so it's important that as we navigate our lives, and as we navigate our lives with other people, we help them, we help ourselves, and we help them see themselves as people, right? Not as the person that's getting this work thing done, not as the star of the football team, not as the person that knows the most about economics, and so I go to them every time I have an economics problem, not as my tax preparer. You see them first as a person. And as you practice that, as we practice seeing other people as people first, so not necessarily just my tax preparer, but the person that I'm really glad to have in my life and that may need something from me in order to be successful preparing their taxes. As we practice that, we're also practicing understanding ourselves as people, right? So people first might sound very egotistical, like, well, what about the animals? What about the environment, right? That's not the point. The point when you think about people first is the idea that rather than our transactions with other people being based on those things that are in our lives, those things that are pushing us, those things that are determining some of our decisions, rather than our focus being there, our focus first should be on that person and why they're there in front of you right now, and why they've chosen this moment, or maybe didn't choose this moment, to be with you, and how can you help them in this moment just as much as how can they help you. So we'll talk a little bit about how to do that, but I want to start here with this idea of people first, because we have to carry that idea ourselves in order to be able to navigate the world better, and we have the ability to carry that idea for others to help them navigate the world better. And what that helps do is it helps people to find their purpose. It helps people to understand who they are, as opposed to being seen as an engineer, for example, or being seen as a tax preparer. It helps them be seen as a person. I remember not so long ago, I was leading an engineering team, and I challenged them to not define themselves by their title, all right? Challenged them to not define themselves by their title. And so I said, you are more than an engineer. You're more than that. Think about yourself as the person that's able to, in the case I was leading facility engineering, a person that's able to create buildings for other people, the person that is able to understand what the people that are going to live in that building need, or what the people that are going to work in that building need. That's who you are. Your title is an engineer. right? You have gone to school, you've gained your credentials, you're absolutely more than capable. But who you are is that person that's able to design a fantastic solution for people. That's who you are. And it was really interesting because they said, no, 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 no. Who I am is an engineer, right? And so they said, well, I am an engineer. Okay, yeah, I didn't say you weren't an engineer, but I said you're more than that. You're more than that. Your purpose is to create spaces that people want to be in. That is what we're here for from an organizational perspective, you know, which is well beyond that degree that you earned 20 years ago, right? It's this ability that you have now to continue to grow your capacity and deliver solutions that not even you can imagine right now. And in those conversations, while at first they thought I was just flat crazy, what they eventually realized, and what we realized together, was that we could deliver more, literally more than we had conceived, if we just stepped back a little bit and thought about the purpose that we were serving. And that is leading through a person, as opposed to leading through a title or what you expect from them and what they are going to deliver. So if we think about all of these external pressures, we realize that what we want to do is live our purpose, and we want to put people first, then we have to think about, okay, how do we do that? And how do we, you know, given the realities of life, you know, and I am a realist, by the way, given the realities of life, how do we do that? And so we have to think about that. How do we want to be in the world? So I asked you, for those of you that pulled out your Hoover app and answered your question, do you see yourself as a palm tree or as an oak tree? And it's a very interesting question. And I don't know if anyone in the room wants to answer, you know, how do you see yourself, and how do you want to be in the world? Do you see yourself as a palm tree or an oak tree? Does anyone have any interest in in sharing what their answer to that question was? Yes, ma'am.
I chose oak.
Yes.
I'm a deciduous one.
Uh-huh.
I watch those trees grow in my backyard, and I think they're amazing. They get so much energy to be bright and beautiful for this small little period of time, and then the rest of the time they're dormant, and they're always building a reserve.
Yes.
So that they can do it again. So that was the oak to me. Is that
Yeah.
all of the time it spends not being green, it's saving up all that energy, getting up all that strength, just so it can be that beautiful for a short while.
And so it can be just as strong or stronger the next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little bit bigger. You can't. I'm watching trees grow out my windows.
Yes.
And it's just like, wow, it's just getting a little bit bigger, but it's already a huge tree.
That's right. And we watch them bloom and we watch them grow. Yes, every spring, which has been fantastic. Did anyone think they were a palm tree? Yeah, so we have one person here that thought they were a palm tree.
It reminded me of vacations and happy times, and always green, and I got a few in my backyard.
Oh, we have a mic.
The palm trees just remind me of happy times, happy places, and the oak I thought was kind of like everyone's going to pick an oak, so
Yeah,
I chose the palm tree.
they do. So palm trees do, and when people look at them, often they smile, and a lot of people also look at oak trees and they smile. And there's a big difference between palm trees and oak trees, and both are very good at what they do, right? As was mentioned with the oak tree, it stores its reserves, and then every spring it brings all of that energy into full blossom and a full bloom, and it provides shade in places that people are appreciative of having it. And then you have the palm tree that doesn't necessarily go through that dormant period. But the other thing the palm tree does that the oak tree doesn't do is it has a flexibility based on its root system that you don't necessarily see from an oak tree. Based on its root system and the way that its trunk is created, a palm tree can bend like 50 degrees without falling over, right? An oak tree can't do that. But there are things that the oak tree can do that the palm tree cannot. Okay, so the oak tree is stronger. It has more branches. It can hold more nests and things of that nature. It can hold more life and create more life. And so the question is, for us, do we understand how we want to be in this world? Do we understand our purpose? Is our purpose to be able to support the life of multiple animals? Or is our purpose to be sure that we're always there in the sun and in the wonderful tropical climates, no matter what happens, whether we have a hurricane or not, right? You know, like, do we want to be that resilient, flexible, what do we want to be? And so for me, and we'll come back to the trees, but for me, you know, my purpose, my personal purpose is to develop honorable, confident, satisfied, skilled minds that embrace the deltas in life. So the deltas, the changes that are going on in life every day, to develop minds that have the ability to move like a palm tree, right? That have the ability to adjust to change in a more agile way, in a more flexible way. And that's everything I do. That's what I try to do, you know, because there are a lot of changes that are coming at us all the time. And what I'm interested in is helping people take all of that external influence that's touching us all and move with it, adjust with it, you know, flow with it. So I see myself as a palm tree, and my purpose is to help people that want to become palm trees themselves, right? To help them be agile and to move with it. And also to help them work with oak trees, right? People that are more deliberate and more focused on using their energy in a different kind of way, because we need both. So that's my purpose. And why is that important? It's important because, you know, I understand how I move in the world. I understand how I want to help others move in the world. But we all have to understand that we're all moving in the world. And that when we choose who we're going to be, that's who we're going to be. A palm tree is going to be a palm tree. It's not going to be anything else. And an oak tree is going to be an oak tree. It's not going to be anything else. And it has that endurance that we spoke of, that lets it rejuvenate every single year and become more than it was before. And that palm tree has that agility. And if you notice, they're both dependable, resilient, strong, and capable. Okay? There's no difference in, you know, they're both very capable of being very strong trees. And when we think about people, what we tend to try to do with people is have them define a purpose that makes them so completely different than everyone else. Well, that's not necessarily what purpose is all about. Purpose is just about understanding who you are and understanding the nuance of who you are, and then taking that nuance into the world with you. And so while we might think these trees are dramatically different, not so much, but they do understand that they have different purposes and different ways of being. And so when we think about that and we shift to leadership, right? So this is that second part. So we think about, so we've talked about external influences. I haven't said the word stress, but we talked a little bit about stress and how external influences cause stress. We talked about us being that drop in that big ocean of things that are going on, and how do we make sure that we don't dissolve? How do we make sure that our purpose isn't lost when we merge into the ocean? Well, we have to know what our purpose is. We have to stand tall and proud of it. We have to understand that we don't have to be some completely unique unicorn in order for our purpose to matter, which is what we were just talking about. And once we understand that we are different and we do have a perspective and we are valuable, now when we consider how we lead others, we can take that in with us, right? So we walk into who we are based upon observations of ourselves and our characteristics. And we try to hold on to that despite the change that's going on around us. And when it comes to leadership, here's how it works. When you do that work to understand yourself, what you're also doing is seeking to inspire yourself, right? So many of you have heard the saying, first seek to understand yourself, then seek to understand others, then seek to be understood. You've heard that, right? When you're seeking to understand yourself, what you are also doing is finding your own source of inspiration. right? So here you are, you're in the ocean, right? You're navigating, and you have to understand who you are so that you can have the impact that you want to have. This is how we stand out. If you have an idea, you want to understand why do I think this is such a great idea? Why do I think this is awesome? Because now as a leader, I'm about to try to help other people get excited about it, right? Why do I think this is awesome? So it's not a matter of, if you're leading with people first, you don't just go to the person and say, I've got a great idea and I want you to do this tomorrow, right? What you do first is you say, I've got a great idea, but why do I think this is important? Because you're going to have to play that against why other people think things are important, right? So why am I inspired with this? Do I understand why I have unique perspective? Do I actually have unique perspective? Maybe I think it's special and it's really not, right? And the question is, what's the backstory for the idea? Why did you even come up with that idea in the first place? So you take the time to understand yourself, and you take the time to figure out, can I talk about this idea while being vulnerable, right? Can I talk about it while I acknowledge that it may not be a perfect idea? Can I do that? Can I do that? Because if I can't, chances are I'm going to approach that other person and I'm not going to put them first. I'm going to put myself first, right? So if you're trying to lead with people first, you start in the inside, you start with yourself. And it doesn't have to take forever, by the way. This doesn't have to take forever. Like, this only needs to take a little while for you to sit and think about, why do I want to take this forward? And can I share my idea with other people while helping them feel safe? So I'm trying to be my own person with my own purpose in this world. But when I'm seeking to inspire others, I first have to look inside, start inside and inspire myself and understand, why do I think this is cool? And am I willing to not be right? Okay, this is a really big deal, because then you go to the next step, which is seeking to understand others. But when you're seeking to understand others, what we're really talking about is having empathy. So this doesn't mean you're giving up on your idea. This doesn't mean that your idea is not valuable. What it means is you're acknowledging that just like yourself, everyone else is trying to be who they are, right? In this ocean. It's not all about you, to state it really simply. And so now you say, I'm going to go forward and I'm going to seek to help others, seek to understand those that I'm working with, and seek to understand why they are where they are. I may have already assumed that they're not going to like my idea, or I may have assumed that they're going to love my idea. But what I have to do is let go of those assumptions, share my idea, and seek to understand where they are. And ask myself, as I'm listening, am I truly listening to that perspective? Am I truly hearing it? Am I able to merge my idea with theirs if their perspective is something I hadn't considered? Or do I use those moments to understand why they are where they are, so that I can relate that to where I am, right? So there was a reason I was inspired. And now I need to understand the difference between where I am and where they are, so that we can move forward together, right? Now, this is true even if you're the leader, right? Remember, I said leader. This isn't necessarily the leader saying, whatever you do, we're going to do, whatever you say we're going to do. And it's not also necessarily the leader saying, whatever I say we're going to do. It's the leader saying, I've got an idea. I think it's okay. Let me understand where you are and why you are there, so that we can figure out whether we should move forward or not. And if so, how do we move forward well, right? How do we do that well? This idea, this is the basis for inclusive leadership. And you all understand I'm leading diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the biggest challenges we have in many environments, large companies, small companies, families, and things like that, is people not necessarily wanting to include other ideas for fear of losing themselves, right? Or for fear of not being able to get it done. I can't talk about this forever because we just got to get it done. We just, no, because if you take that little bit of time to truly take in the behaviors of those around you and the needs of those around you and be empathetic to those around you, then in the end, what you come up with are solutions that are more inclusive and often better, right? Often better. But what's great about this approach, inspiring yourself first, is you understand where you are, you understand what you were excited about. And now as you start to understand where others are and what they're excited about, you have the ability to do this mindfully. And you're not losing yourself, right? You still have yourself, right? And what you have even more than that is people that are interested in working with you because you're listening. So there are a lot of questions on this page that I hope you've been reading through. But the bottom line is, when you think about your own purpose, you know what it is. You know why you're inspired by this idea. And are you keeping in mind that they have purpose and that the organization has purpose? And if you're doing that and you're doing it well, then what you often end up with is solutions that are sometimes exactly what you thought in the first place and sometimes just a little bit different, but better. Okay? So that idea of understanding others. And then once you understand where they are, now you engage, now you inspire, now you can move forward as a team, as a unit, with each of the individuals still feeling that they have value, with each of them, having had a chance to express how this idea or how this new thing, this new initiative aligns with their purpose or what they think is important. And what's even better, I mentioned earlier, as adults, oftentimes we forget what we're passionate about. We forget what we care about. The more you have conversations with your team that ask them, what do you care about? The more the team is able to bring that forward and to really understand what they care about. Because oftentimes when adults don't know what they care about, it's because no one cares to even ask. No one cares to even ask. And so now their ideas become stronger. Their way forward becomes clearer. And ideas start coming back at you as a leader that you may have never expected. So it's building relationships, it's understanding the possibilities, but it's understanding it by first understanding where you are and acknowledging where you are, being willing to be wrong. But while you're doing that, you're strengthening your purpose, you're strengthening how you want to be in the world. And then you go and you spend time with others and allow them to do the same. You allow them to do the same. And so all of this is grounded in personal purpose and grounded in organizational purpose, which allows you to move forward with strong results. And frankly, with people that are more inspired rather than people that are just doing what they're told. And so what I've been kind of bouncing around in this whole thing, and I look forward to us talking about this, is this idea of energy and where your energy comes from and where it doesn't come from. So I'm often asked, Telva, how do you do all the things you do? And generally it's because I'm pulling my energy from the inside, as opposed to allowing my energy to be driven by the things that are going on outside of me. And that brings us back to the palm tree and the oak tree. Both of those trees, very, very different, very dramatically different, draw their energy from the inside. That's what allows an oak tree to come back every year. That's what allows a palm tree to be resilient and shine and create smiles for people that are traveling to the beach, right? Right? That's what allows it is pulling its energy from the inside. And yes, it has a root system. I get all that, but bear with me, right? Because it's using its strengths. And so when we think about energy, we think about inspiring ourselves, what we're doing is controlling our energy. When we're thinking about seeking to understand others, we're inspiring those around us after we do that. Leadership is about managing energy first in yourself and then in those around you. And that's a quote by Jim Clausen, who wrote a book called Level 3 Leadership. If any of you want to check it out, it's pretty academic, but really cool. And if we want to be strong leaders, and if we want to have a culture of innovation, we really, truly have to think about managing our energy from the inside out, managing our purpose. Start there and then work out. And the graphic tells you about some things that we have to keep in mind when we're doing that. They're outside influences, that's the ocean. And what they will tend to do is make us feel like we don't have control. That's what they'll tend to make us do. All of those outside influences we talked about, and there are many, there are innumerable. But if we pull it back inside, if we remember that we're the drop in the ocean, we pull it back inside and we center ourselves around our purpose, whatever it is, even if we're still developing it, right? We center ourselves there, we become stronger. And that strength allows us to overcome our fears. So it builds capacity for us to raise our energy level so that we can overcome our fears, so that as we interact in this ocean every day, which will tend to drain our energy, we can create a holistic circular cycle. Okay, so ocean will tend to drain energy. We will need to come back to our purpose in everything we do and how we operate, how we interact with others. And oh, by the way, my examples were about the teams we work with at work, but this also applies to your family. So you find your center, you start from there, you inspire yourself, you seek to understand why you're doing what you're doing. That gives you capacity to expand beyond those outside influences and to raise your energy level. And then you just do that repeatedly and practice it over and over again. Over and over again. So regularly examine yourself and your purpose. Put people first when you're leading through problems, regardless of what kinds of problems they are and what part of your life they're in. Work to inspire from the inside out. Start with yourself. That will help you maintain your energy and allow others to do the same. And what's really, really cool about that last piece, which is what you're doing when you're leading with empathy, what you're doing when you're inspiring from the inside out, allowing others to do the same brings you more positive energy than you would otherwise have in that ocean that you're navigating. So with that, I'm going to stop and ask for questions. I'd love to have a great discussion. We've got about 10 or 12 minutes. And so I'd like to have discussion, questions, and I know some questions might come in through the app here. And so bear with me as I look at any questions. So we have no questions online if I'm looking at this right. Does anyone in the room have any questions or comments even? I'd love to have a discussion. Yes, we're gonna get you the mic.
So I know I walked in late, but
okay.
I appreciate what I did see. And I know there was something you mentioned about when you're making a decision or you're about to lead a change, making sure that the right people are at the table and you're including everybody. So that thought in mind, we all have unconscious bias.
Yes.
And so I was curious if you had a tool or a reminder to kind of like gut check ourselves when we get to that point and we say, no, here are the things I need to remember to address my unconscious bias and make sure the right people are at the table.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, it's interesting. So this idea of first seeking to understand yourself includes, when you have your idea, understanding what biases you might carry for the right people to even consult on that idea, for example. But it also includes you saying, why does this make me excited, right? Why is this a great thing that I want to share with others or help develop with others? And by going through that process, that's the time for me, that's when I check my biases, right? So, you know, I think about, well, the last time I had an idea like this, did I have the right people at the table? And oh, I learned that I didn't have all the right people at the table. So let me make sure I get that right this time. Let me make sure I don't mess it up, right? Who do I want to talk to about this? You know, what kinds of voices do I need? And this is where vulnerability comes in. Because remember, we talked about, if you have an idea, you have to be vulnerable enough to know that it's not perfect, which means you have to test it. So the people that you want at the table are the ones that can help you test the idea. And sometimes those people aren't the ones that you want to have at the table. Okay. You know, I mean, that's a lot of times where your bias comes in. And so you really have to get to that point when you're still with yourself, where you say, what doors do I need to let down? Because if this is going to succeed, this is what's needed. Okay. So that's the next step. And then the last thing is, once you get everyone in the room, you absolutely have the opportunity to ask more questions than you're giving answers. And that's a tool that I use to help control bias. Is I work on practicing listening more than I'm speaking. Okay. Because a lot of times when you ask the question and let other people speak, you'll hear perspectives that you wouldn't have heard if you're seeding the conversation. Okay. And that also allows the team to feel more empowered. But it allows you to check your biases in your own mind while those comments are coming. And I'll tend to try to ask questions rather than speak fact, right? Until it's time in the conversation. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts?
Well, one, just to get your perspective on it a little bit, which is, here we go. Just to get your perspective and maybe open up a little bit of a discussion, which is, I would call the value of discomfort.
Yes.
Why does something make you uncomfortable? And what is the growth? And, personal examples. First time you ever swam, you were scared of the water, probably even got thrown in by a parent or somebody like that at one point, but you learned that this is good, this is fun. Now you jump in the water on your own, but it was very uncomfortable the first time you did it. Like so many things, professionally, you know this, you're comfortable with this, and now you go with a different group of experts, and now you're not the subject matter. It's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It's different because you're not familiar with it. Mm-hmm. So I guess it would be your thought on the idea of seeking out those things that make you uncomfortable and embrace them, realizing that that is a path to success and growth in the future.
Absolutely.
Your perspective.
Thank you. So seeking discomfort, honestly, it's something that I think is extremely important and valuable. And so I do it often, and I do it because it helps me grow. So I value discomfort because it helps me grow. And I have a saying that I share with people all the time: if you're not growing, you're stagnant. What else are you? You're dying, right? So if you're not growing, you're dying. If you're a living being and you're not growing in some way, right? I mean, us adults, we're not necessarily growing physically, at least, well, maybe a little bit during COVID, but you know what I mean? Okay. But if you're not growing as a living being, then you're on the decline and you are dying. And so the way to grow is to expose yourself to things you haven't been exposed to before. And that means being uncomfortable, just like you said, trying things that you wouldn't otherwise try, figuring out if you have the ability, honestly, to improve a bias that you may have is extremely uncomfortable, but it helps you to grow. Putting yourselves in situations that you've typically avoided, very important. And you'll laugh at this, but I just want to share it because I think it's so important. I work on it all the time. So the thing I'm working on right now is putting on my pants with the leg that's not normal for me to put my pants on first, right? So if you go home and you try this, right? Tomorrow, putting on your pants, which leg do you pick up first? Chances are it's always the same one. So what I've been working on lately is I'm trying to use the other one. Why? Right? It keeps me mindful of who I am, where I am, like what my habits are, so that I can not get into ruts, right? So practicing breaking habits helps you see your habits in other parts of your life. So even if you start with something as simple as which leg do you pick up first to put on your pants, right? Yeah. Love that question. I know it's like, she is crazy. It's true. It's true. I am. Any other comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything that has just really surprised you in the last year since you've taken on your new role?
Only one? So the question was, has anything really surprised me since I've taken on my new role? So I knew, so I went from a career that was all technical, right? So I'm an engineer, I was a technical leader for 20 years, engineering, maintenance, huge projects, huge vehicle launches. And now I'm leading diversity, equity, inclusion. And I knew when I began this role, it would be hard. So that's not surprising. 150,000, 55,000 people in the company, it's really difficult. But I think the thing that has surprised me the most is the amount that people want to be told exactly what to do. That has been shocking to me. Okay. So we're working to at General Motors, we're working to become the most inclusive company in the world. And this isn't a GM advertisement, but just to give you perspective, that's what we're working on. And so you think about that statement, and then people want to know exactly how to do it because we're engineers and we're finance people and stuff like that. And then when I look out beyond the company, it's very similar. It's very similar, when you look at communities and things like that, because I do a lot of community work as well. And it fulfills me greatly. But the same is true in community. So this isn't just a corporate America thing. This is, okay, so you want me to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion, like, tell me what to do. Okay, well, we can tell you certain things, and we can tell you, we can give you guidelines, and we can give you some perspective. But a lot of that work that has to be done has to come from inside. It has to come from inside. You have to observe what's going on around you and see what's going on around you that you might be able to change or help improve or understand better. And then practice. Just try. Right? This idea of trying is somewhat elusive. So that's the thing that shocked me the most.
Yeah, I could see that. And I'm sure that must have been like, but that doesn't, I'm sure that's not why you got into it, to tell people what to do.
No.
So
No.
would be like, just tell us what to do. That's not what I'm here for.
Right. Like the first time I had the question, do you have a standardized work for that? Actually, no, and I'm not going to create one. Right? Like that was my answer, which wasn't received very well at first. But now people are understanding, and it is hard work. So the other thing I share is, we talk a lot about this. These are soft skills when you think about diversity, equity, inclusion. You can call them whatever you want to call them, but it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to have that moment where you're like, well, maybe I'm not thinking about this properly, right? It goes back to that idea of, this thought you're having, is it as good as you originally thought it was? And that is hard. Especially, by the way, when all of us come to work wanting to be the best people we can every day. No one gets up trying to be difficult for anyone else or trying to exclude people or trying, right? That's not what people are doing. So you're questioning, to some extent, people feel like their personal morals and values are being questioned, which isn't exactly what's going on in almost all instances. Yeah. So we're over time by 1 minute. Thank you all for coming and joining. I hope I've given you a couple of things to think about. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye, Zoom people. Thanks for joining. Enjoy the rest of the summit.